going gangbusters, and he's with us now. Steve, great to have you, man.
Thanks. Over 10 million, closing on 11 million downloads on the podcast with the most ubiquitous show. You can get your show everywhere, but you get it live, direct on the John Fredericks Radio Network. So I want to thank you, John, and the Deplorables audience.
You got it, Steve. You are why we're expanding. Every station I buy, you're the linchpin 10 to noon, Steve Bannon on War Room. Steve, you're getting a lot of play. You're on my show a week ago before I went on vacation, and you said the president, action, 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 stop the nonsense, stop the stupid rallies where he's talking about how he negotiated an airplane or whatever nonsense he did walking down a ramp. And you said, we need action. He's done that. Now you've been credited coming on my show and talking about some of the things that the president should do. Let's go to one, his executive orders that he's done since you called for him to do that. And then secondly, let's get to a speech Friday night in Mount Rushmore.
Well, look. I don't know if it's credited. That stuff, a lot of that stuff has been worked on. I think it's the point I'm making is that, look, you obviously have a campaign and you have to do things on a campaign, but the reality is, the country's in a crisis. President Trump is a wartime leader. I couldn't think of anybody better to lead us through something like this than President Trump. But it's about taking actions. Certainly, you have rhetoric and speeches, things like that, to both put out the construct of what you're trying to accomplish and also to message afterwards. But the key is action and follow up on the action. And I think Mount Rushmore, and then the three things. Mount Rushmore, he did a video in the Rose Garden on Saturday, and then a speech or some remarks on the July 4th, and they had a commonality to it. One of the things I think was the linchpin of this was a lot of things we've talked on the show in really the last month or so, is this tying it back to a cultural Marxist, cultural revolution. This is just not people talking about changes or sitting down on commissions or something like that. That the anarchists, the people causing this chaos and the violence are people that want a fundamental change and a cultural change. What the Cultural Revolution in China called the Four Olds. Killing the four olds, and that is killing your culture, your customs, your thoughts, and your habits. And this is very well thought through, and it's very organized. I thought the president did a good job at Mount Rushmore, and then again at the on the lawn of the White House. But once again, that's good rhetoric to kind of set the construct about how you frame it for people to think about it. Now I think it's a come in with action, action, action. I think they went after Frederick Douglass's statue in, I think it was Rochester.
Yes.
Over the weekend. They
yes.
also tore down the statue of Columbus and threw it into the Baltimore Harbor. In addition, I think they took the head off a couple of the Columbus statues. So I think the president's now got to step up and take action. In addition, this whole defund the police and depolice these areas. This has caused tremendous suffering to the black community. Hispanic community throughout the country. I mean, in Chicago, another out-of-control weekend. In New York, another out-of-control weekend. Atlanta, I think the mayor just put her foot down late last night or early this morning about this Chaz area. And so I think that in that regard, the president will be looking at actions in both regards. One, how he can support and or come in and somehow augment what's going on in these inner cities. You just can't let this violence, particularly in Chicago and New York, just continue to exacerbate. I mean, Chicago is like a war zone. We're going to have Steve Cortez from Chicago on the show at 10 o'clock to walk through it. Steve Cortez, I think, has been the single best guy to really lay this out. And so I think it's action. Look, on Capitol Hill, when they come back, two big things they're going to be working on. One is the last of the part of the economic stimulus, and clearly, I think you're seeing that President Trump's actions on the economy are starting to have a big benefit. But the additional thing is this, whatever the policing bill, there's such a wide gap between what the Democrats want in the House and what the Republicans want. To me, that's another area that President Trump could take action. I've been a big advocate of some sort of presidential commission and something that really has teeth in it that President Trump leads right away, puts together and gets a wide range of voices in there. If people want to make the argument for systemic racism, which I don't happen to believe, but they should have the opportunity in some sort of formal setting like that to make that case and have President Trump take action thereof. So I think, once again, this is all about action coming from the Oval Office, action on jobs, on action on safety or law and order, action on, with reforms, and action on China. If you still think about it, And Peter Navarro, and if you haven't seen this clip or pulled the clip, his Fox and Friends hit with Pete Hegseth on Saturday I thought was classic. Because he said all this anger, frustration, we're at each other's throats, and it came from the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, their virus is what's destroyed the world's economy, really destroyed the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, caused this horrific economic crisis here in the United States, in this pandemic, which right now looks like the surge is coming back or the end of this first wave. And nobody's, very few people are focused their attention on that. So I think these next 2 months are really months where the president can take direct action on many, many things across the board, on the things that really matter to American people right now, and really come to the forefront what people really see as leadership.
So Steve Bannon with us now. Steve, former White House strategist for President Trump, chairman of the campaign in 2016. Steve, what you're saying is the president you would like to see him launch a really full-throated commission on what? Police reform, systemic racism?
Yeah, I've said it before. I think, and you name it after Mr. Floyd, is that, look, there's such
the George Floyd Commission.
Yeah, like you had the Warren Commission and like you had the
Floyd Commission.
Yeah, Floyd Commission, and you would have it named after Mr. Floyd. It would be, and you'd have a wide range of voices there. Right now, there's such a gap between the bid and the ask on what this bill would be on Capitol Hill. President Trump signed an executive order in the Rose Garden a couple of weeks ago. I just think you need something that probably has more teeth in it and more national exposure. And here I would get a wide range of voices. You have not just law enforcement. You have people that want to make the case for the problems in law enforcement. It'd be a Floyd Commission on policing in minority communities, and you really get down to it. And you would do it not that would take 2 years. You'd start having actions, and I think you should say, hey, the first day of my second term, after the inauguration, I'm going to put into action a legislative package and or executive actions that come off of this really thoughtful commission that we have. I just think that's one item, and that's making you the driver of the action. I think right now people are looking for action, and the president, you can start to see they're doing it. And look, they're working on a long time. It wasn't stuff that we were saying on the show. I'd try to give you my best thoughts, but I think it's right now it's got to just be action across a wide range of stuff: safety, jobs, China, and the pandemic. And if you keep hitting that, you're gonna turn fine, because I think people are looking for leadership right now.
Let's get to the pandemic. Let's get to COVID-19. Listen, Steve, I mean, reality is cases are irrelevant. I don't understand what the media frenzy is over this when 99.7% of people are recovering. Those who die, the overwhelming majority of them are over 85. They have underlying health conditions. We have to protect the vulnerable and the aged, like I protect my mom who stays with us, who's 91. I don't go in and see her after I've been out all week. I put on a mask. I keep my social distance. But I certainly don't do that with my 16-year-old son or my wife. I mean, we're fine. So all these cases, everybody can get a test in Florida.
Look. The president.
It's irrelevant.
Hang on. The president made a decision. The president made a decision a couple of months ago to really do this in a way that comported with federalism, and the federal government, as I think most of the structure for dealing with crises or dealing with national emergencies like this, like FEMA, is that the federal government provides resources and overall guidance. The governors are actually the management, day-to-day management, and the execution is at the mayor and the county supervisor level. That's essentially the structure we had. President Trump agreed to that. You say that, and yet you have people like DeSantis and Governor Abbott and Governor Ducey. These are very conservative, smart, tough governors. I mean, these are not, the governor of Michigan. These are not snowflakes. These are serious people that have done a serious job in their states, and they're coming back, John, and saying, hey, I think we got to, do some shutdowns. Maybe we went too fast. Maybe we do this. I do agree with you. This ought to be about, we've learned a lot in the last 3 or 4 months. One is, I think, about targeted interventions. We now know whether it's nursing homes or the aged or comorbidities or minority communities where these things can really flare up. And, particularly whether it's a meatpacking plant or, one of the chicken factories over in Eastern Shore. So we've gotten a lot smarter. What I would recommend is that the president, I think, have those guys into the room. I would have that consortium from the Northeast, Lamont, Murphy in New Jersey.
Forget
and
it. Forget it. I mean, these guys have politicized this thing, Steve, 3 ways to Wednesday. I don't want to. What on earth am I going to learn from Phil Murphy that's trying to run for president?
You're a talk show host, and he's president of the United States. That's the difference. You're not going to learn anything because your learning curve's flat. But just kidding, John.
I get it.
He's president of the United States. He went to this federal system. You bring in Wolf of Pennsylvania. You also bring in Ducey. You bring in Abbott. You bring in DeSantis. You bring in Kemp. You get them around the table and say, okay, everybody's going to have a TED Talk, 20 minutes. Let's go around the table. Exactly what are you doing? What lessons are you learning? What can we do here? He's president of the United States. This is a pandemic. You don't have to overreact to the media, but what you have to do, I think, is get ahead of the curve of where the media is going to go in trying to drive the narrative. And I think one of the ways to have a counter narrative, and what he has done up to date, is actually take leadership at the national level to support the governors, right? And some governors made bad calls. Murphy in New Jersey, I think there's no doubt that the nursing home situation up there is going to be looked at just like Cuomo. But we've learned a lot of lessons. And this is clearly inextricably linked with the recovery. We now see the data and know that if we can reopen rapidly, smartly, and safely, the recovery is going to be there, right? There's no doubt that people want to go back to work, that people want to go out and start to socialize again, that we could actually get this economy opened back up in some sort of judicious way. I think the way to do that is to continue to work with the governors, right? But have even maybe a closer coordination with them, and get them in there and say, hey, look, we've got ventilators, we have PPE, we have these Tiger teams, we have this targeted intervention. We can send teams. If you think you have a problem, we can send teams out of field hospitals or military, get them out to locations, whether that's in Arizona or whether it's in Michigan, as we start to reopen. I think you continue with the reopening that the governors are doing. But listen, you can't dismiss people like DeSantis and Abbott and Ducey as flakes. These are serious people that have big, complicated states, and I think you got to have their back. So I'm all for continuing to do it at the way he's done it with federalism, but have it in a more coordinated way and clearly get people in there and have them start talking to each other.
Well, I think we can do that, Steve Bannon, if it's not politicized. I mean, I go back to this in the height of this thing.
The way you depoliticize it is to get people in a room and start taking action. If you want to depoliticize things get politicized when you start. It gets to be narrative.
Right.
If you're taking action and you're sitting there saying, "Hey, Cuomo, tell me what the problems are, what the issues. I got Birx here, I got Fauci here, I've got the FDA guy over here, I've got Dr. Ben Carson right here. What are the issues? Bang, bang, bang. Okay, next, Murphy. Tell me, we got the nursing home problem. Walk me through how the nursing homes get out of control.
Well, I mean, if they're all in the same meeting,
and you described it.
No, I get it.
No, you described it with your mother. You're doing a targeted intervention
yes.
as an individual citizen.
Yes.
And we're doing the same thing with my dad. So but you gotta, that I think the targeted interventions now, I think we've learned a lot of lessons. Look, one of the great things about capitalism and the American system, it's adaptive. We adapt. And I think right now you can see that people are a lot smarter than they were, a lot smarter than they were, 120 days ago on the CCP virus. And I think that people have learned a lot of lessons, and now is make sure that we have tight coordination of those lessons and make sure that you're taking leadership on this. And I think that will tamp everything down in 3 or 4 weeks. And then you get all the bitching and moaning out on the table instead of having this backstabbing and all this sniping and the media narrative that the thing's out of control, which I don't think is the case. But I think you want to go back to the governors and make sure that you're pressing down on the governors to actually manage this.
I like the idea of getting all the people, all the responsible parties in one room at the same time, where you can get rid of the nonsense and the media biting and things of that nature. So I like that. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're with Stephen K. Bannon, host of War Room 2020. Go to warroom.org. More information, 10 to noon, Monday to Saturday, John Fredericks Radio Network. Also on America's Voice Video, Channel 219, The Dish, live, and on Newsmax every night, 11 p.m. to midnight on video. So he's got his own show there. Don't want to miss that, Steve Bannon. with us. Now, Steve, a week ago when you were on, you said, and this got picked up in all the media, you said really what the president has to do, we need a change in the message. We need to get rid of these rallies and start doing the actions that you're talking about now. Now we got another rally in New Hampshire. What is your comment on that?
Well, look, don't get me wrong. Look, I love, obviously, from 16.
I know you love rallies.
16, I love rallies. It's just, it's like Ecclesiastes says, there's a time and place for everything, right? There's a season for everything. I'm not sure this is the season for rallies. President Trump's followers, love him. He's got his followers. He's got his base. He's got his movement. They love it. I think I just say, look, it's opportunity cost. You've only got so much time, so much energy, so much focus, right? Is it better to have that all-day meeting with those governors or have a rally in New Hampshire? And obviously, when you go into a rally, you get lots of local media, you get a lot of people enthusiastic, you get the grassroots. Some of that, some of that's going to be needed. But maybe push the rallies back to later to maybe have a little more handle on this. I got to tell you, in the rally yesterday, let's talk about the buried lead. They said you got to wear a mask, or they recommend you wear a mask, right? This whole mask narrative, which I think has gotten ahead of the White House, I think you'll be driven into some sort of, they're going to have to now confront the mask thing.
Yeah.
Because in the rally, they said, this is what the mask, and that's what you kind of teeing yourself up for. If you don't have a rally, but you have a thing at Camp David with 20 of the top, epidemiologists to go through the pandemic or to talk about the economic recovery, talk about, jobs, not just the stock market, but jobs, maybe you avoid that. So it's not that, look, I love rallies. Rallies are, but it's like I said, there's a time and place, there's a season for everything. I just believe, and I just stay on this, I think we're in the season of action and directed action, and the president's followers. I mean, what the president's followers want to see is victory. They want to see things accomplished. They want to see the agenda that they voted him in for accomplished. They want to see actions, and they want to see him win a resounding victory in November of 2020, November of this year. And if you could ask if the people who listen to John Fredericks Radio Network, which is the kind of home of the deplorables, if you ask them right now in a poll, would you rather have actions that led to victory in November and the execution of the agenda that you supported or a rally, I'll bet you it's 80-20 for actions, right? Remember, the deplorables, the great thing about deplorables, they're the most practical, pragmatic people in the world, right? The working class and middle class of which the whole country's success rests on their shoulders. They're pragmatic, practical people. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure in New Hampshire it's going to be a great time on Saturday. Oh, it's just the thing about Rushmore, you can see the excitement of the people. It was a fantastic setting. The president had a very powerful message. But it's to me, it's the opportunity cost. And now you've got this Capitol Hill. You got to get an economic stimulus package through, and something maybe on this policing thing. The month of July is going to be crazed, and so I'm just not. I think for right now, you put rallies on hold. You do actions, and you can always get back to rallies later. And
I agree with you.
Your base is going to be so. Your base. Well, look, the way to check it is do your thing on. We'll do one today on the show. You should. Yeah, I recommend you do one because I like hearing from the people have a great common sense and a great pragmatism. They love President Trump. They're supporters of his program. They believe in his message. They believe in his actions.
Right.
And I think I would put it up to them. Hey, would you rather see more actions or more rallies? I think we'll take a poll today and see how it is. But I believe the deplorables have the president's back and want to see action.
Well, actions, because right now the Democrats have captured the message. I had Scott Rasmussen, Steve, and K. Bannon on a little bit earlier, and he said the Democrats have now, their message for 2020 is clear. More and bigger government is good for you, and as a result of that, you're going to have to give up a lot of your individual freedom and turn to government for answers. No question about it. He also did a poll which he said that the stimulus plan by the Democrats was garnering 70% support versus 20% of Republicans that don't want to spend any money. What do you make of that?
Well, one thing I think Biden tweeted out, and I think that we ought to start framing around that. He said he wanted to transform America. I think his tweet this morning, I don't want to misquote him, but I think he said about transformation. I do believe that they want to have a massive transformation, and I think we ought to make that. We ought to make that part the vote. What's under Biden? When Biden talks transformation, let's put some flesh on the bones. So let's actually talk about what he means. It's one thing to do these polls, but look, I think Scott Rasmussen is fantastic, general thing. I would get down to the granularity. That's why it goes back to actions. You're gonna compare and contrast Biden's transformation, because you're not gonna smoke him out with rhetoric. You're gonna smoke him out with actions. You're gonna smoke him out of he's just gonna sit in that room doing with Jill, his wife, putting the bib on him to do the Proof of Life podcast once a month until you force him out. And you're going to have to force him out through actions. Otherwise, he's just going to sit there and ride this thing out. And I think that here is that you really get into the granularity of when Biden says transformation and Scott Rasmussen says people want big government. You have to define that for people. You have to define what the consequences.
What does that mean? Right.
What does that mean? And here's what I'm doing on the opposite of that for freedom and liberty and for individual self-reliance, understanding we're in a very complex world. And particularly, I think a lot of the anger, the frustration of the American people should be, and must be focused back on the perpetrator of this, which is the Chinese Communist Party. And right now, they're going to put a model up for the world of a totalitarian, mercantilist control environment and say, hey, we can handle this better than the West. The West talks about all these liberties, but when these crises come up, they're at each other's throats. We, on the other hand, know how to control people. We know how to do it through technology. We know how to do it through other social forces. We know how to do it through, a draconian police state and surveillance state, and we can do this. This is an alternative to the ideals of the Judeo-Christian West, and really this alliance of liberty from India to Brazil to Japan to Taiwan. That we represent, and it's they're going to push that narrative. We now have to turn, and I think this week for the president, Hong Kong is a big deal. We just can't leave that hanging out there. He came in the Rose Garden in May, laid down some heavy markers on Hong Kong. These guys are just defying the West, defying the United Kingdom, the United States, the entire Alliance of Liberty, to say, hey, we don't care. We're going to put these people essentially in a prison, just like in mainland China. And you're not going to do anything about it. We're going to back you down. In fact, your capitalists, your finance guys are still going to finance our companies. You're still going to give us all the dollars we want. Our economy's still going to thrive, and you're just going to have to live with it. So to me, we're coming to a point like 1938 that we got to make a decision. And the president said he promised action. I think we're going to see this week what these actions are in Hong Kong and against the Chinese Communist Party. And then he mentioned China a couple of times over the weekend, then to hold them accountable for the economic carnage that they've wreaked into the United States.
Stephen K. Bannon, final question, then we got to go. A lot of media buzz that there's pressure on Steve Bannon to go back inside the campaign rather than being on the outside, to have a direct hand like he did in 2016 in trying to make this comeback a victory. What say you?
Have you ever heard this concept, John Fredericks, called fake news? Just one that was put up. Hey, I still stand by the thing that the media is the opposition party, not the Democrats. No, there's absolutely none. I am 100% of my time on taking down the Chinese Communist Party and doing the war room. I'm always there to support President Trump. I think we do as good a job as possible. We're highly partisan, but we have a pretty large Democratic audience. And one of the reasons I think we try to do an even-handed job on the pandemic, an even-handed job on capital markets, on the economic crisis, and things are going great. My focus is taking down the Chinese. If we don't take down the Chinese Communist Party, we're going to head to there are two people in Norfolk should know this. In Newport News, there's two carrier battle groups in this, between Taiwan and China right now. The Global Times, which is the tabloid voice of the government, very vicious against the president, myself, and Mike Pompeo and others. They have been mocking the United States Navy all weekend, saying, hey, you got these battle groups. We have these missiles that could take you out in one shot. And the Navy actually responded. So the Chinese Communist Party is an existential threat to the citizens of China, to the decent, hardworking Lao Beijing, the old 100 names of China. They've oppressed them now for 70 years. It's a totalitarian dictatorship that has to be confronted, and that's 125% of my time. So I'll continue to do the war room pandemic and try to talk to you and other guys like this on shows and give guidance or throw out ideas where it's necessary.
All right, well, then we got to bring
don't believe the fake news.
All right, Steve Bannon says he's not going back into the campaign, but we got to get Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossie and there, Steve. So we'll see what happens. Hey, Stephen K. Bannon, thank you very much for being with us. Stephen K. Bannon Live, John Fredericks Radio Network, 10 to noon, Monday to Saturday.